Hello, and welcome to today's Insight Hour, hosted by the Economist World Ocean Initiative and sponsored by IBM. Today, we will take a closer look at leveraging the power of blockchain for seafood. Now, in recent months, the discussions around sustainability in the seafood industry have really intensified, with issues around food fraud, waste, illegal fishing practices, and mislabeling really coming to the fore. In today's discussion, we look at the potential of one possible solution to some of these issues: the use of blockchain to enable traceability of seafood from hook to fork, ultimately increasing transparency and building consumer trust. Today's session is a part of the Economist webinar series designed to continue conversation and engagement with our World Ocean Summit audience. We are currently working on the agendas for the first World Ocean Summit Asia Pacific, which will take place virtually in December, and for the 9th Annual World Ocean Summit scheduled for March 2022 in Lisbon, Portugal. We look forward to welcoming all of you to both these events and to our forthcoming webinars. If you'd like to consider sponsoring or speaking at our events, please contact Tatiana Der Avedesian, whose details are on your screen. Now, to contribute to the discussion today, we have three esteemed panelists who are leading the charge on increasing transparency and implementing advanced tech solutions in the seafood industry. I am pleased to welcome today Kathleen Cook, Worldwide Business Leader at IBM Food Trust, Donna Lanzetta, Founder and Chief Executive at Manna Fish Farm in the US, and Marte Lund Myran, Marketing Manager at the Norwegian Seafood Trust. Now, over the next hour, I'd like to break down the discussion into three segments. The first, which is understanding blockchain applications in the seafood industry. The second, delving deeper into some of the challenges with implementation. And third, driving collaboration, which is at the heart of increasing transparency within the system. So to kick off this first section on real-world experience with blockchain, Kathleen, I want to come to you first. Now, blockchain is expected to bring numerous benefits to the global seafood industry. Could you start by telling the audience a little bit about how it works? How does blockchain improve transparency in the seafood supply chain? How can consumers confirm the provenance of seafood they're about to purchase at a store?
Great question, and it's an opportunity that I have to answer it, and thank you for that. So if we start with blockchain, you really need to think about blockchain as an enterprise blockchain that allows the communication and collaboration between multiple partners in a supply chain. So we are not working within, four walls of a company. We are really looking at the partners within that supply chain. So if we start out with some of the basics of blockchain, first of all, the data is immutable. So it's different than a database. It's when you put it in, you cannot take it out. So it can't be tampered with. So there's an element of trust in that data that's established with that first benefit. The second thing is permission data. What that means is that a partner in the supply chain owns that data, and they put the data into the application built on blockchain. And that essentially, they permission who can see that. So there's control that the end client has, or the end partner. And then the last point is a single ledger. So if you imagine if everyone has their own ledger, they're updating, and they say, well, I paid you $10, and the other partner says, no, you paid me $20. That's completely eliminated. Disputes are completely, you still have disputes, but they're reduced significantly because you have a single ledger. So those are some of the basics. Now let's look at the seafood industry. So let's look at the supply chain relative to seafood, and I'll kind of help you understand the importance, and then we'll get to the consumer. So when you have the supply chain in a seafood supply chain, think from the very beginning, the hatchery, of the smolt or the fledglings. Think about the feed that's going to be feeding those fish that are in the pens in an aquaculture situation. And then think about capturing information about the care of that fish. And then as you move through the supply chain, you're gathering information, certifications about the fish, the product, the processes. And then finally, from harvest and then to shipping, you're now enter in the whole elements of cold chain, capturing the temperature of that product as it moves through the supply chain. So ultimately, you're going to get to a processor that's going to put a QR code on that package that the consumer is going to see, and it's going to contain all of that information that I just talked about. So from a consumer perspective, when that consumer goes into retail and scans that package of smoked salmon, for example, they can see the journey of that product. They can understand the freshness of that product because you have harvest dates, locations, and you can even see the pictures of the pristine locations of these pens, whether it's in Norway or it's in Canada or in elsewhere in North America. So we have results that we've been given from other retailers that have seen increases well above 10% in their sales, given the fact that the clients are trusting that information, trusting that product, and coming back to buy.
Fantastic. That does sound really interesting and really has a lot of promise to capture a lot of data. I do want to delve into that a little bit more, but I want to turn to Marte now to learn a little bit more about her experience. There are some really interesting examples in the Norwegian seafood industry of fish farms and other farming companies that are tracking a lot of information regarding the catch. Why do these companies want to track and share information? Is it consumers who are demanding this? And how did these companies implement these systems to effectively share this data?
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie. There's so many exciting stories about the fish companies in Norway and why they are doing this. And there are several reasons. But the main thing and the main focus for them is to share. They want to share more. They feel that they have so much to share and so little to hide. So they needed to start somewhere. And as Kathleen were talking about, all this data that they already have on their fish farms, they use it today to do whatever they could do to document their production, increase the quality of the fish and their production and everything they could do to improve. So how can we, Norwegian Seafood Trust, IBM, how can we use this data to improve this fish farm in every way? Yeah, we need to tell the consumer all about this story. So what has the fish been fed? Where is it from? What are their conditions? How are they vaccined? Everything about that. The consumer wants to know. And why should we hide it? I think that's the main thing that they were focusing on. And then they also want to use their data in a better way. They want to improve all the way to take a position in a market that is all about price. And they want to be able to say, hey, we have been doing something very interesting here that maybe one of my competitors didn't do. We have some certificates we want to tell more about. And also, why should we hide when there's so little to hide? Quarry Seafood is a very good example here. They want to share. They want to share everything and also talk about the CO2 footprint and the sustainability in what they have been doing on their fish farm. So they have taken all their data out, put it in line and taken everything out so they can do more to the quality, but also to share with all the participants in the chain. And when they are taking the data out, they are making a special commitment in this chain for everyone that's in it. And for Quarry, as an example, they had like a marketing strategy behind all of this, and they wanted to do something more. They wanted to create that experience for the consumer that you were talking about, Kathleen, that they're coming into the shop. There's tons of seafood there, how are they going to stand out? How are they going to tell the story about this amazing seafood from Norway, the purest of them all? And then you can go in there and scan the QR code and get all the story up.
Fantastic. Honestly, that sounds really exciting. And you're right. Why should they hide when they're doing something special and trying to stand up apart or set themselves apart from their competitors? Donna, I want to turn to you because Manna Fish Farms has also committed to 100% transparency. Can you tell us a little bit more about what traceability means to you and why it's so important for the seafood industry?
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Yes, as you know, Manna Fish Farms is in the process of securing permits to farm in the ocean. And whenever you go out into the commons, that entails securing a social license. We believe that in order to secure this social license, transparency is an imperative. So with that, we'll be able to share with the public as we develop offshore aquaculture in the United States and let everyone know that we're not harming the environment. We're not releasing any antibiotics into the marine environment. Our fish feed is sustainably sourced. And so these were all our commitments to fish farming to start. And as we moved into bringing that product into the distribution chain, it seems a natural segue to continue that transparency. And not only that, to collaborate with others throughout the chain and bring them in to share data and operate more efficiently. So for Manna Fish Farms, 100% transparency is our commitment. And for us, traceability is an integrated concept of food safety and consumer information. So utilizing tools like the blockchain, we can take that transparent story and bring it all the way through the supply chain.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I really like what you said, that to secure the social license, transparency is imperative. So thank you for that. I want to link this to the bigger story about the priorities in the seafood industry. And Marte, I want to come to you here. Could you tell us a little bit more about what are the main priorities for the seafood industry over the next few years, perhaps in terms of consumer trust, sustainability, reducing bycatch, and so on? Could you tell us what some of the main priorities are?
First of all, I think there will be a pressure, not only from the consumer, but also from the governments and the United Nations and everyone, that we need to know more about the food we eat. And the tracking is a solution to use to come to that. But the most important now, I think, they need to share, and they need to be more willing to share. And it's a young industry. They need to figure out how can we use technology to improve ourselves, to improve the production, and to improve the entire industry. So I think that if we use all of this technology, we can give the consumer the trust that they are demanding, because they won't let this go. Absolutely not. And I think that the increasing demands of what kind of CO2 print do you set, and what can you do to improve that, is a question that will be along the way with us, and we need to reply it, and we can't just say something. We also have to prove it and document it, and these documentations are the only thing we got.
Great. And so, Kathleen, I want to link technology now to some of these priorities. How can advanced technological solutions help achieve some of these goals for the seafood industry?
Yes. Let me lay out these priorities a second. So let's put them in different categories. So it's food safety, food waste, reducing food fraud, increasing sustainability. And if we think about fraud, provenance is a really good word to think about. So we were meeting with one fish company, and after we talked about all the benefits of, what an application built on blockchain would provide, the CIO said, this really isn't about fish. It's about the data about the fish. So if we think in terms of fraud and safety and those things, there's different technologies we need to think about. So from a safety and freshness, let's think about automating the cold chain. So that means that we're tracking the temperature of that product via sensors that are in those cases, or they're in the container. We're monitoring, the refrigeration units in distribution centers. So what's important is that if you have active sensors, you can know immediately if you've got a pallet of fish that's sitting on a tarmac in 100-degree weather and it's affecting the product. Okay, so that data is captured throughout the way. From a fraud perspective, you're capturing data immediately. When you bring the fish in, you're labeling it. If it's on the boat, you're capturing data about the location, the time, etc. While you're weighing that fish, and you're capturing that data. From a sustainability perspective, we can capture sustainability or carbon footprint every step of the way, and we can put that into the blockchain, and we can show it even on a consumer app. Insights and analytics, dwell time within one distribution center versus another. All of those insights can be used for, within analytic tools. So I just want to note that provenance is really important. And it helps to think about it in terms of the export value of fish. You're not necessarily going to double the production of seafood, but you can increase that value pretty significantly, because if a processor is looking at buying fish from one farm versus another, and then that one farm has got all this information and data, it's more likelihood that processor is going to go to that particular farm. And that's increased sales, increased revenue for that particular farm. So those are some of the things as I think about, food waste. Let me just comment on that one last, and I'll turn it over. Is that if we're capturing information about that product and the temperature, you're not throwing out a whole pallet of fish. Because of the fact that you've got a few cases in there that are spoiled, et cetera, and you can track that fish right back to the farm and all the steps in the way.
That's great. Those are some really it did. Those are some really compelling ways to achieve the industry's goal, I think. So with that, now I think we've set the scene for why companies are interested in doing this. I want to move into the next section, which is identifying and overcoming some of those challenges with implementation. But I think I want to hear a little bit more about the implementation journey, and I'll start with Donna there. Can you tell us how far along you are in the journey to implementing blockchain, and what are some of the early learnings?
Yes, my pleasure to share the exciting news that Manna Seafood Blockchain has convened a network for seafood. Our focus is the North American seafood product. And there are many challenges in this endeavor, I have to say. Adoption and education, teaching the fishermen and farmers what is blockchain, how can it help them, and bringing it down to some simple points like, hey, we can save you on your product's liability insurance. Hey, you'll be able to reduce your distribution costs. And also, I think what we have is the opportunity to address the fact that the seafood distribution chain is so inefficient, and also the producers are not properly compensated for the hard work that they do to bring that product to the market, the lack of compensation is tied into the inefficiencies in the market. And so what we can do with the blockchain is make it more efficient, reduce some of the intermediaries within the chain, bring more of the revenue into the farmers and fishermen, and really also reduce our carbon footprint by collaborative distribution and really streamlining some of the models. We use all of these tools that we have. We have sensors and cameras and robotics for offshore. We take that product onto the blockchain. We have alternate sensors that monitor temperature. And we have to, beyond the education of the first adapters, we also have to develop tools like DNA sampling at the onboard location, or species identification through an app that we're working to develop. Things that will ensure that, one, the product is what we say it is, what the blockchain says it is, and eliminate all fraud. And we carry that all the way through the chain.
That's great. And thank you, Donna, for raising that issue of education. It is something that is perhaps not easy to understand for many people. And so education is a very important pillar of rolling this out. Now, Kathleen, I want to come to you about another challenge. From the research that I've been doing, one of the biggest challenges is that link between the physical asset, that's the fish that's been caught or farmed, with the digital asset, or that tag. Now, you can tag a crate, for instance, but what if the actual fish in the crate are compromised? Is there a solution to that, or is that something that still needs to be addressed?
Yeah. Donna gave some really great examples of capturing the data and capturing it at the beginning of the supply chain as well, right off the boats or at the farm. So because blockchain has a permanent digital audit trail, of what's being done with that fish at every step of the way, you can begin to get rid of some of the bad actors, or at least address some of those types of things. But if we look at, we've talked a lot about sensors, and that really is a good way to capture anything that might be compromised. Whether it be, as I mentioned a couple of times, the temperature control, and monitoring that. These active sensors can report immediately on if there's anything that is compromised relative to the temperature of the fish. There's other technologies that IBM has that out in the marketplace. One is around the verifier technology, and this is really taking microscopic images of product at various stages as it goes through the supply chain. So you can even look at seafood and see if there's a variant in the color, or is there a frozen aspect to it, and you compare these things to what the fish should look like. That's also a good one around fraud. And this technology is being used even in the pharma industry, that you're looking at a pill. Is that pill the right, you verify that is the drug. Take that to a fish and take that to seafood and verify that, the content of a pristine piece of salmon, versus another, fish that maybe it isn't. Can you look at that and say, yes, this is the salmon, or this is the rainbow trout, or whatever that you're looking at. The other thing is that there's light sensors that can be put in the crate that you can sense if it's been opened. And then again, that data can be put into, all of that we collect. You've heard it a million times today. We collect all that data and we put that on the blockchain. But, the more that people adopt blockchain, the more they are going to use IoT and AI and those types of technologies to support what we capture in the blockchain. The more we can do with automation versus human intervention, the better. You're always going to need human intervention, and it's always going to be there, and the data is as good as the data is that's been put in. But automation absolutely will be the key to addressing any of this compromise situation.
That makes a lot of sense, Kathleen. Donna, I saw that you raised your hand. Did you want to add something more to what Kathleen has just said?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's important to focus also on the interoperability of systems and how this can lock in and build value in a seafood blockchain. For example, we're in the process of opening up a restaurant right now. So we're looking to bring our blockchain seafood product into our restaurant to the end user. And we look at our systems that are running a restaurant for inventory, for example, and we're able to say, okay, through the blockchain, we've taken in 12 dozen oysters from this particular farm, and all that data comes in, and then we can verify it through our sales that we've sold that many of that product. Mm-hmm. And the same type of in-out verification can be done not only in the restaurant, it can also take place within the processing, within the trucking. And so this provides an extra protection so we know there's not fraud within the system.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of checks and balances within the system that can help verify and improve the veracity of the information on the blockchain. Marte, I want your thoughts on this as well. And I think from all that we've discussed, it seems that to increase the trust in the system, the more automation, the better, whether it's from sensors or video cameras and so on. Is that your goal as well, Marte, from your experience of what you're doing in Norway?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I think all the consumers, but also all the participants in this chain, they demand that the data who is in the chain are trustworthy. And of course, we can do it manually. We can have this PDF fish firm and walk around with it. In many ways, that should be enough, but it isn't, because we have so much cheating and fraud. And the Norwegian market, we have been saved for that. But the global markets, they have big issues with this. So how can we back again use this data that they already have and automate it? Even more, so that we can actually use it for something more and create the trust for all the participants in the chain, but also for the consumer. And I think that if you know that the data you put into this chain will be there forever, but you can edit, you can add data, and you can explain if things happened, and you can have an open relation with all the other participants in the chain. It's more like we're doing this together. And as Kathleen were talking about in the last questions, you can do some adjustments if something happens, and then you can do it fast. You can do it before the fish has been destroyed, and you could even do it on a production level on your fish farm. So the way we automate this data can make us earn more money. We can have the food longer, and we can also know so much more about it all the way out.
Absolutely. And you said we must do this together. And I think that's the perfect segue to the next section of this discussion on driving collaboration. Marte, I want to continue with you. In Norway, it seems that the industry regulators, the tech providers have all come together really successfully and to develop the system for greater transparency. Can you tell me a little bit about how Norway made this happen? What is your advice to other countries that want to replicate this?
Yeah, this is an amazing story to tell, because Norway is in the front of the technology in the world, and we want to do more, we want to learn more, and we want to use data and technology to create value for people. But how can we also create value into this food industry or other industries? So my mother organization, the Norwegian Seafood Association, they were talking to IBM and one of the largest technology vendors in Norway, Atea, and they got together and said, what can we do together? We need to see the aquaculture and the seafood industry's view. We need to see the technology view, and then we need to go out and talk about this, because we know that we are using technology today, but we can improve it and we can do more, and we can use this data that they already have and give them even more value for their money with this data. And I think also the pressure that we feel from outside, the global pressure now, that we feel that we need to open up the borders and say, okay, what are the global market demanding from the Norwegian producers? We need to jump for those. They are the one who are buying our fish. They are the one who are setting the prices. So we need to open our eyes now and use the technology in an even better way. And we are so close. So I think that it's a little bit pressure, but it's also a lot of engagement, and people are really want to sharing more. So it will be an exciting year. This, I think.
Okay, so that's quite exciting that there is pressure from sort of the global agenda towards sustainability, towards improving things in the seafood industry, but that's bringing people together to solve this problem. So I think maybe keeping that as the focus is a great motivation for all these parties to come together and improve the system. Donna, I want to hear from you as well about what you think or what we need from governments and from regulators to increase transparency. What kind of support do companies like Manna Fish Farms need from government and regulators?
Yes, Manna Fish Farms and Manna Seafood Blockchain we're inspired by the Norwegian model, and we're excited to be leading the way in these areas. And we're motivated by our government, which has recently enacted mandatory traceability reporting for seafood. This is legislation that's been passed, and it's another requirement for seafood producers. So we think that blockchain has an opportunity to solve this additional reporting requirement, again, through the interoperability of the blockchain with the USDA requirements for reporting. So we're trying to make it easier for producers, not overburden them. They're already overburdened with regulations. So by keeping it simple, we can address what this is a massive problem, seafood fraud, with, I think the statistics are so high that 46% of seafood is mislabeled. More than half of the people in the world distrust seafood. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. As an example of just what we're up against, I don't know if you all saw, but recently on LinkedIn, someone shared a photo of a piece of salmon, and it had a label on it that said Alaskan coho, and then on the other side it said Chilean farmed. So what is it? We don't know. If it was on the blockchain, we would know. So really that's what we're up against, is fighting all these misperceptions that are negative surrounding seafood, all the lack of trust, and being able to build that trust through trust in the blockchain.
Thank you, Donna. I want to get your thoughts on this, Kathleen, as well, just again around collaboration. When we were speaking before, you said that individual companies in the supply chain must be willing to share their data and believe that transparency will help the industry. So which types of seafood players in the supply chain perhaps might be reluctant to share their data, or maybe more broadly, how is IBM working with all stakeholders within the seafood supply chain to bring everyone together?
Yeah, it's a really interesting, and I'm going to say it's a dilemma. Transparency is a double-edged sword. It gives you visibility, but there are some people that are players that may be a little uncomfortable with that. So, and it's not always that there's bad actors that are, the ones that are uncomfortable. We do need to weed out those bad actors and apply, the kinds of policies that you can put into the blockchain, to reduce that. But back to the point, it takes a sponsor. So what IBM does is it works with the sponsor of the network. So if you think about, Manna being the sponsor of their complete network, you think of the Norwegian Seafood Trust being the sponsor of their network. These sponsors, these companies that work in the industry, know their supply chains best and know their partners best. So it is a bit of a convincing and educating and helping them really understand the end to end. So if you're at a fish farm, you may, or even a hatchery, you may not be thinking about the end consumer, buying your fish because you've got it goes through so many steps from the harvesting to, the processing and then the distributor and the retailer to the restaurant, However, we can show those that are upstream the types of things that customers can see and actually see the benefit of that upstream supplier or producer and even raise up that particular producer within the industry. So it's helping everyone along the way see the benefit, and sometimes it's a sales process, and then it's in helping to understand the technology. What is this technology going to do? Can I protect my data? And that's a very important point. So not only is the data that these individuals are putting in, these partners are putting in, not only is it permissioned, meaning they can decide who can see it, so they've got control. The other point is that it is secure. You're not going to publish to their competitors or et cetera about that data. So it really is trying to get them to trust as well, those along the way. And I think that's really it. And what we do is work with, as many partners in the supply chain as possible, but it really comes down to the sponsor, whether that be a processor, whether it be a producer, whether it be a retailer that is really, championing the supply chain.
That's great. I think those are two really good points there about ensuring that everyone along the value chain understands the value of sharing that data and coming together as a system, and also about ensuring that there's security in the system and that your competitors then don't have access to what you consider proprietary. So those are two really good points there. Marte, I want to get your thoughts on making the system more inclusive as well. Given the use of such advanced technologies, are there any risks of leaving out those who cannot afford the necessary technology? For instance, the artisanal fisherman who wants to sell their catch to the urban market. Would this system be designed more for industrial fishing then?
During this collaboration, we have been trying to make this network, this Norwegian Seafood Trust network. And when we bring together the Norwegian seafood industry and build this standard together, we have also based it on how big you are, how much fish you got, how much you track, and we always try to make a product or a service for everyone, because the largest companies, they have so good control on their data and they know exactly what to do with it, and they maybe even tracking it themselves. So we need to make sure that this is a network for everyone. And we know now that demands and laws have not said yet that we have to trace our food. But we want, even though, to make a new international or national standard for how are we doing this in Norway. How is the seafood industry in Norway supposed to be in this chain together and building it together? So transformation is always very, very hard, and it costs a lot of money and time. And I think that for the smallest company, we will try to take their data as they already get them and use them in the best way. But of course, everyone needs to contribute to make this raising of the entire seafood industry. We need to do something, everybody. So with that in mind, I think that we need to push them, but we also need to have them with us, because when you see the values in the other end, and then they understand the value of their fish and their brand, I think it's easier for them to find the money to do this.
Okay, so leaving no one behind, and I think that's the key message there. We talked a lot about interoperability. Donna mentioned it earlier, but Kathleen, I just wanted you to comment on that as well, coming from IBM. It's absolutely critical, and for a global supply chain to come together, you need to standardize these systems. How is IBM thinking about that?
Yeah. So let's think about what the layers of what we've been calling the system. So blockchain is at the base. So, and on top of that is an application. It's a transparent supply is what IBM has named this. So it's an application, which is really what's important, because it is the interoperability between that application and let's take the first one, what's important, which is interoperability of data. So collecting data from a database or an ERP system or a marketing system or a shipping system, these are, I should say, application versus system. So it's connecting those two. So that is one interoperability that we have, and Donna gave an example of that as well. The next one is interoperability between blockchain networks or application systems, etc. So we have that today. IBM's offering transparent supply is an open network. We can share the data. We can have connectors between blockchain. And the application itself is what provides all the tracing and the certifications, to track the documents, the consumer apps, and the insights. But there's interoperability at the data level between applications and then between blockchains. And then the other piece is around data interoperability is because we are based upon GS1. The GS1 standards. We have a number of industry standards that we're based on, and that allows also that interoperability. The other thing is, and it was mentioned as well, how do we help the small farmer that's trying to get their data in? It may be spreadsheets, and we've got the tools to input spreadsheets or from databases, et cetera. Okay, and then the third one is business interoperability, and this is really looking at business processes. What are the points at which I want to enter data into one application or system, and I want to be able to connect through into the IBM blockchain? So that is thinking through the process. What companies don't want to do, or customers don't want to do, they don't want to have to buy into or sign into multiple systems in order to get to their data. So that's really important to us, to be able to provide that connection so that, it's very easy to go from the customer to their current vendor into our application seamlessly, and they're able to pull the trace, they're able to have the insights without having to have multiple sign-ons. So it's really at the data level, the application level, and then, the business level, and it's all built upon that application built on, the blockchain.
So just to follow up on that, Kathleen, does the GS1 standard, does that take care of standardization at all of these levels, at the data, at the application, at the network?
It's at the data level. That's at the data level. But the fact that the blockchain, from a network perspective, is open, that allows for the connection from one blockchain to another.
Great. Okay, fantastic. I do want to spend a little bit of time in this session to answer some of the amazing questions that have come in from our audience. But before we get to that, Donna, I just wanted to hear from you as well about what advice, what would your advice be to fishing companies such as yours that are considering increasing their transparency and trying to share their data within the network? What would your advice be to them?
So my advice would be to consider participating on a blockchain. I would explain to them that this commitment to transparency and traceability doesn't mean that their information is their data is lost or they lose the ownership. I would point to them that they still own their own data. Also, they get to select with whom they wish to share that data. So it's not like it's out there for the world. It's out there for the people who are participating with their consent. So I think that that's important that everybody understand the opportunity here and that we all collaborate and work together for to develop a more efficient system for a more sustainable future.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I do want to move on to questions from our audience now. It'd be great if anybody who does want to comment on it, just raise your hand and for you to jump in. We got a question from Jackson at Skeena Fisheries Commission. And his question is, how does the energy consumption of blockchain factor into sustainability? There's a second sustainability question as well that I want to sort of club in with this one, which is from Paul Connolly, the CEO at Marine Institute. And he asks how blockchain can enhance the circular economy and blue growth, and is it a strong enabler for sustainability? Kathleen, I was wondering if you would want to take this one, and again, happy to get comments from the others too.
Yeah. So from a circular economy perspective, and we can think about that in many different ways. We certainly have plastics companies that are looking at, the sustainability where they're returning the plastics into bottles again, and tracking all of that stuff along the way is absolutely something that we do. The energy consumption and the input around even the carbon footprint, that's all information that we gather, and we look at that as an event in the system where it's pulled into as another action or activity that's being done on the very specific product or the process. So that activity, whether let's go way back. I mean, if I'm have fish feed that part of it may come from fields. I mean, how are we treating the fields, ensuring that we're capturing the carbon, with the regenerative, field process? I mean, even that would be kind of information that we capture. So absolutely, we capture each step of the way the information regarding the energy that's taken up for the different processes.
Great. Donna, I don't know if you want to comment on this too. Was sustainability a key consideration when sort of considering adopting the blockchain system?
Absolutely. Our plan for Manna is a circular business plan. We are integrating from the farm through the distribution chain into the restaurant. So we get an opportunity to develop a sustainably efficient plan for our operations and take that model and share it with everyone and encourage them to be circular in their thinking as well, because our goal, and it should be everyone's goal, is to be carbon efficient and to reduce our emissions across the board.
Great. I want to go to another yeah, sure, Kathleen.
Yes, let me say another one around circular economy. Though this example is not in the seafood industry, it's in the coffee industry, but we are working with another one of our customers, Farmer Connect, who is essentially certainly tracing the coffee, but the whole emphasis there was to raise up the livelihood of the farmer and contribute to the communities that those farms are in. And there's got a capability of being able to, when you buy a bag of coffee, you can contribute to that farm, to that community, to that individual owner, and all of that is captured within a banking transaction. So there's on top is a complete financial transaction for tracking that, and then able to give those farms and those communities increased financial support.
Great. Okay, thank you for adding that, Kathleen. I do want to go on to another question from our audience. This one's from Sophia Wong. She's an analyst at AGF. And her question is, what does the economics look like for such solutions for a company? Which players will benefit the most from the adoption of blockchain? I don't know, Donna, you may be a good person to answer this, but I'd like to hear from you and maybe Marte as well.
My pleasure. I think that brand owners, whether it's the processor or the fish farmer or fisherman, will see an increase in their brand value of anywhere between 10 and 20% at minimum. And I just think that that's a wonderful thing. The second half of your question was with regard to...
No, it was which players will benefit the most, and I think you mentioned.
Oh, yes. One of our things with regard to our particular plan, we're hoping not to charge the smaller fishermen that you mentioned earlier. As we ramp up, we will hope to get to a point where under 2 million would be able to participate without cost. And that would be, that's what we're looking to do. And that's somewhere, again, to tie in your other question about government participation and how they may support, certainly to assist with helping the small farmer get on to the blockchain, providing education and outreach, and that interoperability piece. So I think with us all working together, we can get it done.
Fantastic. Marte, any comments on who you're seeing is benefiting the most from the system you set up in Norway?
I completely agree with Donna. It's the fish farm that has the biggest win here, absolutely.
Great. Okay, fantastic. I have another question from Aniket at the University of Reading. And Marte, maybe this one might be for you. Is there a way to prevent the manipulation of data entered onto the blockchain? So I think the bigger question is about how can we ensure the quality and accuracy of the data input into the blockchain? Now, we talked a little bit about that with the automation of some of the data capture, but do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing right now is to get it as automated as it can be into the chain, and then you also will create the trust among the participants. So of course you can also do some manual job, but the human aspect and the fraud aspect and all the things that we have been talking about, they making this less trustworthy. So if you use automation in a better way and often, it's so much more difficult to do something about this data and make it wrong.
Sure, Donna, I see your hands raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, I would just add that the others who would benefit from this blockchain, it's not only the farmers, but also the commercial fishermen. Certainly, it would help with their reporting, and now with this new legislation in the U.S. To do the mandatory traceability reporting, it would allow them to do that effortlessly. I think that's really important.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that as well. I want to go to another question from Jennifer at the Palau Pledge. How does MSC accreditation work with the blockchain authentication process? Kathleen, I don't know if that's something you can weigh in on.
I can't. No.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Yeah, go for it, Donna.
So I think what the blockchain will do is encourage these good actors. We're not there to punish the bad actors or catch the bad actors. The blockchain is there to encourage good actors. So we want to take those good actors who receive certifications like MSC certification or Global Aquaculture Alliance BAP certification or organic certification or whatever wonderful thing they're doing. Those are the good actors we want to bring onto the blockchain and ensure that their product doesn't get switched out. We have a program with U.S. Organics, for example, and I spoke with a farmer and said, why don't you be one of the first to become U.S. farmed organic in the U.S. seafood? And he said, what's the point of picking up all that additional expense and worrying about all of that if my product is going to be switched out in the marketplace? And he knew that that was happening, and that kind of inspired me to seek out the blockchain to secure. I'll be back to him to say, okay, we worked it out.
That's a great story. Thank you, Donna. I want to move on to our next question. It's from Jacob Main from New Angle. Sorry. Yes, go ahead, Marte.
I just had a comment. We were talking a lot of the producers and the seafood industry, but the main winners here are the consumers overall. Yeah, absolutely. They get all their demands taken care of, and they get a special opportunity to be in a shop or at a restaurant and choose the product that they want to have, and they want to know more about it, and it's all up in there for them. So they are the winners also.
Fantastic. Kathleen, just a final comment.
Marte. Yeah, I completely agree with Marte. It takes the mystery out of this. And that's what it really takes the mystery out of the fish when you're buying it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists for such an enriching discussion. I hope all of our audience members learned a lot more. I know I did. I think at the heart of this is that we need to know more about the food that we eat. And this is one way to capture, store that, and communicate that across the value chain. I think there's a lot that we need to learn about the technology and its experiences, such as Donna's and Marte's, that we really want to learn more from as we go along and as the technology and the systems mature. I think ensuring that we communicate the value to all stakeholders is a great way to motivate everyone and bring them together, and also ensuring that data is protected, that there's enough security, that they don't lose ownership of the data. So a massive education process for fish farms, for commercial fishing companies is a big part of this process of increasing adoption of blockchain in this system. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful insights. And I hope we all get to speak again. Thank you to our audience for tuning in, and do join us for our next Insight Hour.